Hey everybody, let's talk about temperature range. You guys have been seeing the quilt on my wall. You guys have been seeing the pattern cover sheet. This is the pattern cover sheet. Both of these pictures are of the same quilt. One's just in better lighting and draped, and the other one is flat on the floor. This is the temperature ring quilt pattern. It is a temperature quilt and it is a double wedding ring quilt. So when you get your pattern, it is going to be in a PDF format unless you are paying for a printed format. I've printed mine, all 63 pages, and put it in a 3-ring binder. So that's what you're going to see mine in today. One of the pages you're going to see in your list is your supply list. So I want to go over this real quick. So on the supply list, I do recommend an AccuQuilt Go or Go Big with a die number 55078. You do not have to use that. You can use template plastics and a permanent pen to trace everything, or you can use templates for another version of a double wedding ring suitable for rotary cutting. Not every design is going to work, but I want to go over with you what you need if you are going to make your templates work. So in the pattern are some sewing guides. This is guide G, this is guide K. So these are rough cut. They are oversized from the templates, so that way you have some room to be able to use your own design. So as long as your rotary cutting templates fit within the guidelines of these sewing guides, then you can use them with this pattern. So that's the first and foremost. A lot of people ask about that. Another couple of things that I recommend is an add a quarter, and if you're going to do the paper piece letters, I recommend an add an 1/8 ruler. And then I also recommend Ziploc bags. And this is entirely up to you. But what I found when I was doing my temperature quilt the first time, and what I'm going to do the second time, is I'm going to put each block, each month, or well, rather each center, I'm going to put each center in its own bag. And in the pattern, there are layouts for whatever goes in each of these bags. So for example, I've got bags 1 through 6 here, 7 through 36 are in my box. But so I've got, you will need a total of 48 bags, and I am using gallon size bags. These are large enough to be able to hold everything that you need to hold for each center. So if you want to do a different filing system, you absolutely can, but I found that this was the easiest way to keep everything together, and then I don't have to worry about where it's going to be. So I do recommend Ziploc bags or a similar type of product. You will need whatever you're going to use for paper piecing. So whether you're going to use regular printer paper, whether you're going to use foundation fabric or a different kind of foundation paper, a wash-away paper, or if you're going to use freezer paper that you don't sew through, you need to have whatever of that you're going to use. Whatever product you're going to use for your paper piecing, that is entirely up to you. That is a personal preference. One thing that I do include in the pattern, and let me go to mine, I've got several pages of labels. And these labels are fairly small, so they're not big, they're not, they're not going to take up a whole lot of paper to print them, but you have labels within your pattern, and there's 4 or 5 sheets of these guys. I mean, there's quite a few labels. So you have literally everything you need to be able to label everything. So you can label your bags with these. So, I was labeling M1 through M6. This is what you guys saw. So, I mean, I've got M through all the way through 48. So you have every single label that you could need. You can write these on something else, however you want to do that. So if you are going to print them out and use them that way, I do recommend just print your paper out, set it down on your rotary cutting mat with a ruler, and cut them into strips, and then cut them as you need them. If these are too small and too hard for you to hang on to, you can absolutely do other options. I'm going to use magic clips to clip these little labels onto everything that I am using. And because I'm also using a Ziploc bag type system, these are going to be super easy to keep up with the bag. I can also write the numbers on the bags should I need to. So those are also included as well. You will need a sewing machine or some other way that you're going to sew everything, all of your basic sewing supplies. I do recommend when you pick out a cutting ruler to be able to cut your fabric that you do have one that has 1/4 inch markings. You don't want to go with one that is just whole and 1/2 inch. You will need that 1/4 inch. I do recommend magic clips or other kinds of pins for holding everything to your pieces. And you will need pins for pinning your pieces when you are stitching. You are going to, this is my personal preference, I like these little, they're usually marketed to sewing, not quilting. But I like these little pins, and they are glass head ball pins. They're great for piecing these curves. You can get them in much shorter sizes, but I like the glass because if I need to iron over, I'm not going to worry about melting them. You can also use magic pins. So if you have a box of magic pins handy, or you've gotten a box recently, that would be a great thing to use as well. So this time around, I am probably going to use these just because I am super excited to be able to try them out. These are heat resistant, not heat proof. Like glass are, so they may still be able to bend a little bit, and they may still be able to burn a little bit. So you may still need to be careful, but I'm going to give these a try. So you can try whatever kind of pins you like. You do not necessarily need to have the flathead like flower pins. You can get away without those. If you want them for your paper piecing, then get them for that, but you don't need them for all of the other sewing you'll be doing. So for fabric recommendations, so when you're looking at the quilt, and I'm going to bring up just the picture here on the pattern cover sheet. So if you're looking at the quilt, the centers or the backgrounds of this quilt are kind of a tan, or they appear white in this picture. They're all the same color. You can make those as many different colors as you choose. For your centers, you need 10-inch squares to cover the entire layout. That's if you're cutting using my templates that are included, that are AccuQuilt Go templates. If you are using your own, you need to adjust for whatever size your template or your rotary cutting design requires. For the peels, the little sections here in between the little rings, those you need 3-inch by 7-inch pieces. So again, if you're going to cut them from scraps or you're going to go super colorful, you absolutely can do that, but you will need 3-inch by 7-inch pieces to do that. For your arcs, I have put in that you will need, bear with me because I don't know that I put it on the back side of this, and apparently I didn't. So because you can choose lots of options, I did not put it on there. For your other fabrics, so all of your fabrics that make the temperature part, so all of these ring pieces, all of these super colorful pieces, and then your setting squares, those are entirely up to you as well. The setting squares in my quilt are going to be all one fabric this time. So originally they were 4 different fabrics. This time they're all going to be one fabric. And then I am actually going to do 4 variables. So I'm going to do 4 colors. I'm going to do blue, red, orange, and this green stack. And that's my personal choice. You can do 2 instead, or you can do 4. If you're choosing to do 2 fabrics, I recommend a lot more fabric than what you need for just doing 4 fabrics. So for example, a two variable quilt, if you're only doing 5 fabrics, you'll probably need 2.5 yards of each fabric. And that's, you know, again, it depends on what you are going to end up needing. So because this quilt has a lot of variations, if you wanted to do the nine value for variable quilt, you'll need the least amount of fabrics as far as the amount of yardage you need. If you are doing the 5 variables or two variable 5 value version, you're going to need a lot more. So you're going to need 2.5, maybe 3 yards. And that's because your values are going to need a bigger piece of fabric, and you're going to be repeating that value a lot more because you're not using as many different colors. So the more colors you use and the more variables you use, the fewer fabric or the less per yard you're going to need. So I'm doing a 7 value for variable quilt. So I'm going to have 4 colors. I've got, again, red, orange, green, and blue. And then I'm doing 7 values. So I have 7 different green fabrics here. And these are pressed and they are starched. Now, I will say this probably until I am blue in the face. You do not have to necessarily starch your fabrics, but the reason that I do, especially on a project like this, I'm going to be working on this for a full year. This is going to be a really long-term project. It's not just a one and done, or I'm going to be done with this in 2 to 3 months. This is going to be a full year long. I don't want to pick this fabric up in a few months and have to repress, and I don't want to add starch later and then really find out that my fabrics are going to stretch at different rates. So treat your fabric the way you're going to treat your finished quilt. And so if you think there is a remote chance you might even starch your fabric later, definitely starch it now. Now for your backgrounds and your peels, I highly recommend starching. And the reason for that is your backgrounds and your peels are going to need to have stretch to them. Your value fabrics like these do not necessarily need to have super amounts of stretch to them, and they don't need a lot of extra stabilization. Your others will definitely need it more, but it's wise that if you're going to starch other pieces of your fabric, go ahead and starch these. It just makes sense. It really just makes a lot of sense. I do promise I'm not crazy. It has proven time and time again to be my godsend when it comes to quilting. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of what you're going to find in your workbook in the Temperature Rings quilt pattern. So you're going to start with your main workbook. And your main workbook is going to walk you through everything that you need to do to get ready to be able to go on to cutting and going further than that. So the first question in the main workbook asks you to go to the layout worksheet. So do you want your quilt to lay out going across, or do you want your quilt to lay out going down and across? So if you go across, you're going to go down and follow along, or you're going to go down and going across as you go. Now this quilt on the sample, if you can see in your picture of your cover, it's going to say September, October, November, December, January, February. So I did an across, then down layout. Okay, now this new quilt that I'm going to be doing in 2025, you guys are going to be seeing, I'm actually going to do down and then across. So I'm doing the other direction this time. And the nice thing is, on your layout worksheet, I've already laid all of that out for you. So you don't have to figure out which centers are going into which pieces. All of that is already done for you. So all your centers that are labeled are already going to be in there for you. There is additionally, let me see if I can find it pretty easily. All of my pages are sheet protected, guys. All right, so there is a layout sheet in the book, or in the pattern, and this is your coloring sheet. Make as many copies of this as you need and color it in until you are happy with your layout. If you are struggling with any of the decisions to get to this point, just stop and go color this. Just stop, make multiple copies, as many as you need. Have your kids color it, whatever you need to do. Color this in so you can see your quilt come to life. I can see mine without having to do this, but if you need it, it is there. And then all of your centers are already labeled. So if you're doing multiple different colors for your centers, or you're doing multiple different colors for your peels, all that is there for you, so you don't have to figure that out. Okay? So the next question, the very, very next question on the main workbook is asking you when you're starting your quilt. Are you going to start it for January 1st? Are you going to start it for a different day? And it gives you information about what you need if you're not starting on January 1st. And you just highlight if you're starting January 1st. You just go highlight and go on to the next question. So I've made it really simple so you don't have to do all this extra math and all of this extra thinking. So when you start on January 1st, then when you come to that layout worksheet where it asks you, which direction are you going? Then it tells you what to fill in, which one to fill in. And, when you know your starting date, what months go where. So I have already labeled, and I'm going to show you guys. I have already labeled my layout worksheet following the directions. So since I'm not doing the across and down layout, I don't need to label that. So the down and across layout, and because I am starting January 1st, I start with January. So I went ahead and labeled January through December on my sheet. So I already have that worksheet done. It was super simple to get to that point. The next one is whether or not you want to do 4 variables or 2. So do I want to do 4 different things? Like, do I want to collect 4 different things, or do I just want to do high and low temperatures? And you have that option. So you don't have to do all of these extras. Then it gives you options about whether you want your fabrics to frame like they do in the sample, or if you want them to go in a cycle order, or you want them to go backwards of your main order. Whatever you want it to do, that's already programmed into the workbook. So you just have to select which one you want and highlight that. It also asks you whether or not February 29th is going to fall in your quilt, because that will make a difference when you are doing a temperature quilt like this. And you've got to fill in all those blanks, all those pieces. Having February 29th or not having it makes a difference. So that's already taken care of for you. There's also, so that you don't have to do this all on your own, there are data sheets already included. Now these are blanks. They start at January 1st, but if you're not starting January 1st, don't worry. You just go start wherever you're going to be starting, and there's instructions for you to highlight where you're starting. So you will know where you're actually starting. So let's say, like in the sample, I started August 28th. So I would just go find August 28th, and I would start on August 28th and filling out information. And then when I get to the end of the year, I come back and I start in January and continue on and fill in until I get back to the 27th of August. So it's super simple. You don't have to think through it. And there's going to be places for you to put your information up here as well, so you know what variables you're filling in for every day. So it doesn't make it too much extra work. You don't have to do extra work. Now, if you want to do this on a spreadsheet on your computer, you absolutely can. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. It is all there for you. The next step is how many fabrics you're going to use. So I chose to use 7 fabrics. But if you're choosing to use 5 or 9, you have that option. And there's a page for you to be able to show and be able to work through all of that. Now, I was showing you a minute ago on the data sheet that you can fill in your variables. So I am doing the high temperature for the day, the hours of daylight, the wind speed, and the low temperature for the day. And so the green I've already chosen is going to be my wind speed. That is what I've already chosen. And so when it comes down to it, when you get to your color chart, you guys, there's a color chart. You don't have to do all this on your own. Okay, there's a color chart. All you have to do is put your information in, and the workbook is telling you to do this. The workbook walks you through it all. One of the things that you've got to fill out is what your strip numbers are going to be. And there's already a spot here in front to fill out your strip numbers. So you're not having to go back through and do it. So let me go back over and grab my main workbook page. Here we go. Let's see, highlight if I choose 7 variables and go to the variables workbook. And that's where I selected that wind speed was going to be green. And then you get back over and you end up getting sent to your values workbook. So your values workbook is going to tell you it's going to walk you through it. But for example, my high temperature for the day, the highest temperature in Casper ever recorded is 104 degrees. The lowest high for the day that has been ever recorded is negative 25 degrees. So what you're going to do is you're going to add those two together, 104 plus 25, and that's going to give you your difference. And then the workbook is going to tell you how to calculate your jump. Your jump is going to be how big between your fabric values. So each one of my values for my high temperature, which is going to be my red, is going to be an 18-point jump. My hours of daylight, I've calculated that out into the minutes for the day, calculated that, and it's going to be a 54-minute difference. So if I'm going up by 54 minutes or down by 54 minutes, that's where my jump is. Wind speed, the highest recorded wind speed in Casper has been 70 miles an hour. So I'm going to group anything above 70 with that 70, but you're never going to have wind speed less than 0. So I've got 70 to 0, and my jump is going to be 10. Then we've got our low temperatures. So my highest low temperature has ever been is 54 degrees. My lowest low is negative 42, which is a 96 degree difference. And so my jump is 13. So this walks you through working all of this. So you don't have to go figure it out. And all of this information is going to help me come back in using the workbook and fill this in. And then I can also have a place here to put my fabric samples. So I don't have to figure out what fabric is what. You've also got your fabric labels in your book. So this is F21. This is my 21st fabric. I've decided that my high wind speed is going to be my lowest color, my lightest color. It's blowing away all the color. So that's what my theory was. So I've already gone ahead and I've got F21 paired up both with my main fabric and with my first strip. So I've already cut my first strip, and the cutting workbook is also included in the pattern, so you're not having to search for that either. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reserve a Ziploc bag for my F21 strip. And so I'm going to go through all of these and using my strip numbers, using my cutting workbook. Everything is walking me through what I need to do to prepare everything. Now, I've done this more than once, obviously, but this is what we're going to walk through on my channel. We're going to go through even the cutting the strips. You know, I'm not going to give you measurements because you're going to need to use the measurements from your workbook, because your strips may be a different size than someone else's strips. And it all depends on all the other factors that you choose, but I've already done all the math for you. So you don't have to figure it out. You don't have to go, okay, well, this is going to go here, but it's also going to go here, so how many strips do I need? You don't have to figure that out. Now, one thing I will say, no matter how many values you're doing, no matter how many colors you're doing, no matter how many variables you're doing, so if you're doing 2 or 4, it does not matter. Please do not cut more than 1 strip at a time. So I have cut my first strip of my F21 fabric, And this is going to go on my box, and then I will cut the rest of these. I will cut the one strip, and I will also label all of my main fabrics with a magic clip and my little labels here. I'm going to label all of that so that I don't get lost any part of the process. So what I'm going to need at my sewing desk, because you're probably already thinking, oh my gosh, this is a lot. And it feels like that, especially when you get started. What you're going to need at your sewing desk, you're going to need your color chart. You're going to need to have your filled out color chart that matches how many variables you're doing and how many values you're doing. You're going to need that. And you're also going to need, let me grab it because I buried it now. You're going to need your data sheets. Whatever data sheet you're currently working on, that's the one you're going to need. So if you want to take a sheet protector or a Ziploc bag, I would recommend a sheet protector, especially for your color chart. But if you want to put your data sheet in a Ziploc bag or turn it over so you have your data sheet on one side and your variable color chart on the other, you can do that. I recommend that you check days off as you sew them. So you will be pulling your data sheet out as you go, but you're just going to pull it out far enough to be able to check off the day and slide it back in. But you do want to protect this color chart because you're going to need access to this all year long. So especially if this takes you longer than a year to do, which that's perfectly normal, you're going to want to protect this page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have these by my sewing desk. I'm also going to have copies of my sewing guide. So because I'm doing the 4 variable, I'm going to need a lot of sewing guide G. And I'm also not going to do stretched arcs this time like I did in the cover sample. So instead of having these stretched arcs in addition to my regular 4 variable arcs, I'm going to do half arcs. So all of that is also included in the workbook too. So you're going to be able to select that and choose that if that's something that you want to do. So what I'm going to need at my sewing desk is this sheet and information, and I'm going to want all of my bags. So because I'm doing 7 colors and 4 variables, that means I'm going to need 28 bags with strips in them. Am I going to use every bag every time? Oh, absolutely not. You're only going to use 4 per day. So, you might be using that same one every day for several days, but that's okay. That's the nature of a temperature quilt. But I'm going to have 28 of these little bags. I mean, these are quart-sized bags, but you can get smaller bags if you like. This is the end of the strip. So I'm going to take it back out to show you guys. When you're cutting for the temperature quilt, you also, because you're paper piecing, you do not have to cut exactly. Okay, this is the end of my section. So this section right here is wide enough. That's what I measured against. So all of this extra fabric, I'll cut it off later when I'm at the sewing machine, when I don't need it. But I don't need to cut it off right now. There's no need to. It does not need to be exact because it's not going to matter for right now. So, it won't matter until I go to trim my arcs at the end. So it's not going to matter for a while. So there's no need for me to stress about it or worry about it. I just need the bag with a strip per bag of each of my fabrics. You won't even need your background to start with. You won't need your background for the peels to start with. You just need your colors, whatever your variables are going to be, how many ever variables you're going to use, so how many ever colors, and then you're going to need how many ever fabrics you're choosing to use. So you could do a quilt with as few as 5 values and 2 variables, meaning you only need 10 fabrics. So you would only need 10 bags. You can also do a quilt with 9 values and 4 variables, which means you would need 36 bags, but I'm only going to need 28 for mine. So that is entirely up to you and all the choices you make in your workbook. But so I need this, I need these, And then I will need some copies of my sewing guide that applies to me. So whether that's Sewing Guide G or Sewing Guide K, you just need your sewing guide. And so you can put that in a little box, a little bag, and just set that next to your sewing station and put your add a quarter or add a quarter plus ruler in there. Keep a small rotary cutter and a small mat handy, and you will actually be set to go. So I'm going to go ahead and upload this tonight. This is New Year's Eve. So you guys are getting this on New Year's Eve. But if you ever have any questions about the temperature quilt process, the temperature rings quilt process, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I am more than willing and happy to look up everything that you're looking at and try to help you figure things out. Now, I will go back to my values for just a minute. So when I was telling you that the highest high in Casper was 104 degrees, and the lowest high was, I believe it was negative 25, those are from different years. So those are not from the same year. I went to the National Weather Service, and there was a PDF available on the National Weather Service that told me that those values were the highest high value, and the lowest max value for Casper, Wyoming. And that is covering the last almost 100 years. I want to say they started in 1923. So don't quote me on what year they started. So I do apologize if I'm wrong on that. So I looked at that, and they also had the lowest low temperatures and the highest low temperatures. They did not have the wind speed, but I looked that up in another location. And then the hours of daylight, I looked through Weather Underground, and typically in North America, summer solstice is June 21st, which is when we celebrate summer solstice, and that is the longest day of the year. Ours was 15 hours and 20 minutes. The low value is almost always in the North America going to be December 21st, which is winter solstice. So that was 9 hours and 1 minute. So depending on what values you're looking at, you may be able to find it through the National Weather Service. You may be able to find it through weather.com. You might be able to find it through Weather Underground, or you may have to look at other resources. The local airports typically do have temperature data. They may not have all of the other data. Now, when I did the sample, the cover sample, I was pulling data from the 1960s. That is incredibly hard data to find for a lot of locations. So I had data from most every day that came from the airport. However, there were days that it looked like the airport, maybe their thermometer got knocked out. So be prepared that you may have to fill in data from another resource. So you may not always get your data from the same resource, especially if you're using historical data. So be prepared for that, but there are a lot of resources that you can find your data at. Some places you can go to the local library and they will have that information for you, or you may have to comb through the local papers. And that may be a little bit more unreliable as far as, how long that process is going to take for you. But if you are especially looking to earmark a special occasion, so this was my husband's first year of life. So I started here in August with the outside rings, and then this is September. And then down here at the bottom in August, I actually filled in with full rings. I did have to put the logo in, and unfortunately that did cover it up a little bit. But you can choose any day of the year to start your temperature quilt on. And you can start any location. So this was in Alabama. I'm currently in Wyoming. But I did get all this data after moving to Wyoming. So I did not have to go back to Alabama to get this information. I was able to get it off of the internet. through online resources. So you are probably going to be able to find most locations like that, especially bigger cities. You should be able to find that. And one question that got asked in another forum is, well, I moved during that year. What do I do? I would actually continue on with wherever you're living. So if we moved in May, when we move up here. So if we were doing this quilt, this is where May is. So around about here is where our temperatures would go, from Alabama temperatures to Wyoming temperatures. So there's a good chance that this bottom section of this quilt would look dramatically different if that's what I had done with this particular quilt. But if you know that move is going to come up, then you absolutely can plan that, hey, I will need a wider range of variables. Or when you get that change, you could actually change all of your colors. So let's say I'm doing what I've got selected for this upcoming year of red, orange, green, and blue. Let's say I'm moving partway through the year. So in my new location, let's say I choose yellow, pink, purple, and teal, or something crazy. So I could choose completely different colors to earmark that was where I moved, and I would have to set up all new values for my new location, for my new target location. So that's another way you can customize your quilt as well. But again, we're going to do pop-ups sewing all throughout 2025 that is going to be going through the Temperature Rings quilt. So you are going to see this quilt over and over and over through 2025, and you're going to see little bits and pieces, you're going to see little parts, you're going to see me sewing on my sewing guides, and you're going to see me pulling these bags out with my fabric, you're going to see me when I get ready to trim things up. All of that is going to be in videos, and I will label them as Temperature Rings pop-up, so that way you can go just Google through or search through the playlist and just look for Temperature Rings, and then every video that mentions Temperature Rings or goes through it will be highlighted for you. If you want a copy of this pattern, if you do not already have that, there is a link below this video to take you to my Patreon shop so you can purchase that. If you have any problems with purchasing through Patreon, please reach out to me via email. Please let me know that there's a problem, because I do want to resolve any issues. And if that's not going to be a reliable resource for me to use in the future for my patterns, I would like to know that soon, so that I can make necessary adjustments and get you guys a better, reliable source to get my patterns. So I want to thank you for watching this video. Thank you for coming to hang out with me to go over Temperature Rings, and here's some of the boring parts of it, even though they're incredibly interesting. It's getting started. The getting started is always the hardest, but I am here for you throughout the whole process. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I am here. You can reach me at thesiberianwind@gmail.com. You can comment on a video. You can come into the chat whenever, if you are subscribed, you can come into the chats whenever I am live. I would love to meet all of you. Thank you for coming to hang out. Y'all have a great New Year's and happy 2025.